Well, welcome to another edition of Inclusion Talks, our podcast, which looks at all ability sport. And it's a great pleasure to be here once again for KISS Professional Solutions. You can get KISS either on their website, www.kissps.com.au, or 1300 547 777. They are the largest independent provider of copiers and printers in Victoria, with a large or small business in Melbourne, Sydney, Gippsland, Shepparton and Albury. They cater for businesses throughout Wagga for business phone systems, NBN services, CCTV and security systems. John McIncroe and his team are based in Carrum Downs in South East Victoria. Well, it's a great pleasure to be here today to have Mandy Moore with us. We'll introduce her very shortly through my co-host, Cindy McDougall. Welcome, Cindy. Good to have you with us.
Yeah, g'day, Dan. Bit of a crazy old morning here, so hopefully there's not too much noise in the background for you this time. Just for Mandy's background, last podcast, my children were happily coming in and trying to be a part of the podcast, so hopefully today's will be a little bit quieter.
Couldn't hear anything, so it'll be fine. It'll be fine.
Perfect. No, great to be back, Dan.
So tell us about
let's get
today.
into it.
Yeah, where we
go. Definitely. So hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Inclusion Talks podcast. Today we are chatting to Mandy Mason, mother of intellectually disabled T20 athlete Juliette Juju Mason. Juliette is a 21-year-old para-athlete who competes in athletics, giving her all to both track and field events. Juliette recently competed at the 2025 Athletics Australia National Championships in Perth, and today we'll talk not just about sport, but disability, school, her incredible career, and everything in between. Welcome, Mandy.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love that I got introduced as Mandy Moore. And it's a weird thing. I've been called that a number of times. She's a pop star from the 80s, I guess, 80s, 90s. Anyway, yeah, definitely Mandy Mason.
I had a bit of a laugh, Dan. That was my mistake. I actually
but it's not the first time it's happened.
The
Western Australian published my name as Mandy Moore. It's happened a number of times, so I don't know.
So
there's a lookalike.
So it's Mandy Mason, is it? Because my notes.
That's Mandy. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Mandy Moore,
yeah, all good.
Also an actress as well. She was in about
She's a pop star.
And a great pop star back in the 80s.
We'll try not to ask you to sing today.
Yeah, definitely don't do that. That's definitely not one of my skills.
And you're coming to us from the west, aren't you? Which is what's about.
I am. Yeah, I'm over here in Perth. Yeah, 3 coffees in.
Very good.
Very early. So, Mandy, you are the mum of the incredibly talented Juliette, which you go by the nickname Juju for her. Is that the correct pronunciation?
It's Juju to everybody that knows her, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about Juju's disability and maybe a bit about her early years?
Yeah, absolutely. Just thank you so much for talking about her as the incredible Juju. She really is an incredible little gal. Started the world, I guess, always want to be sensitive about how I describe autism because, Cindy, it's very, very different for everybody. So I'm not sensitive around words around disability when it describes the impact that the disability has both on the individual and on the family and the community. So the way that I describe Juju is that she's profoundly impacted by autism. What a lot of people don't know outside of disability, and I think also I'm hoping that Australian athletics will educate themselves about, is that she also has a profound intellectual disability. It doesn't always go along with autism. I discovered this very early on in her life. She has an older sister who is, I guess, in the other way, incredibly gifted person. And then along came Juju and changed the trajectory of my life. And I can laugh about it now, but for anybody that is going through it now or has been through it, it's a very traumatic time. And Juju was the type of child who regressed. So she had skills and then lost them all. So, yeah, I had to, I guess, go through a process of understanding what autism was, watching her regression. And, yeah, it's only when you look back on it that you wonder how you survived, because she was a little girl that cut out her eating. She didn't sleep more than an hour at a time. She was dangerously thin. She has been hospitalized before for starvation. She lost all of her language and it got replaced by severe self-injury. And, she's a little girl covered in bruises, bashing her head into the ground for periods of time until I discovered, behavioral therapy, which we have been doing for the last 20 years. And then, so that's a little bit about her journey. It was a long journey for her language to return, for her behavior to improve. I guess really it's been a 21-year journey. And through that process, I became a board certified behavior analyst, which means I work with kids on the spectrum. So I changed the trajectory of my career, and I fell in love with learning and supporting other families when they were going through it. And yeah, that's been our journey together. But I was in little athletics when I was young, from the age of 6, as far as I can remember. And it had a massive impact on my life. And my dream was always that my kids would find their way to athletics. So it took a long time for Juju before she had enough skills to be able to successfully access athletics. But it's been a major gift to my life and to hers.
Was Juju always interested in sport, or was that something that, because of your passion for it, that came about? I guess like me, I'll be completely honest, my kids didn't, and I had to force them a bit to go and do sport. Was that something you faced?
Gosh, that's such a hard question. People always say to me, does Juju love this? Does she? But she's profoundly impacted. So, I have to open environments to her, find communities that will support her, and then she learns to love it. Is that a good way of describing that?
Makes
I
perfect
guess I
sense.
can say if there was one thing that she was really gravitated toward, it was anything relating to water. And so, which is weird because in the early days, I couldn't get her to step onto a beach or put her toe in a swimming pool, but we did lots of graduated exposure so she could tolerate those environments. And because I love the beach and I love swimming. And then one day we were driving past a wake park, and she was really obsessed with Dora the Explorer and Diego. And there used to be vines in those cartoons. And there was just something about vines and ropes for her that she was interested in. And she saw these. I don't know if you've ever been to a ski park, a wake park. She saw these things. She's like, I want to do that. With her limited language back then, I just remember being deeply distressed by the thought of getting her into a pond and getting her to ski around a park. But anyway, we had an awesome community come together and years of practice, and she eventually got that. But then what happened, because I love athletics and I dreamed that my kids would find their way to there. My older daughter had no interest. And then we went to a tri day at Athletics West, and we met the most amazing people. And that changed the trajectory of her life. And that were her 2 coaches that she now has. And they opened up the possibility of her coming along to the track. And then we found our way to the kinetic track squad, and that just changed the trajectory of her life. And that's really how that happened. And now she loves it. So sometimes you have to have a community and then introduce your kid to that community, and then they will fall in love with that because people there understand them and make accommodations for them. And then you have this amazing process that occurs. And it's been, like putting, I don't know, a light under her, is that she's surrounded by people that understand her disability. I guess they've been profoundly impacted because, there's, I guess, the statistics in America are something like 1 in 31 kids of age 8 and under now have autism. But that's not Juju's autism. She is, profoundly impacted. And I remember something that really changed the trajectory of my life was I have a pediatrician who's just the most amazing human. And when I first went to see him, he said, look, I want to tell you why you're so exhausted. It's because I see about 20 kids a week with autism, but I see 1 Juju a year. And that is why you are so tired. And the amazing thing was he took care of me first, and then he treated Juju, which was amazing. He put around of supports for me so that I could support Juju. So that kind of gives you a little impact. About 1 in 4 kids with autism have an intellectual disability, profoundly impacted. But I reckon Juju is a lot rarer because she has a lot of OCD behaviours that really impacted her behaviour and gave her self-injury and things like that. So yeah, profoundly impacted. So when I found my way to a community that said, hey, come on in, Juju is welcome here. How can we help her? How can we work with you so that she can be included? And now we have this little thing that happens in their group, and we call Juju in a loving way. She's kind of our litmus test. Like, can athletes that join that squad work with Juju and support Juju and understand her? And if so, they're welcome in the group, which I absolutely love. That's an amazing community that says, look, here's someone profoundly impacted that can be included in this group. If you can work with her and support her and be, and welcome her into the group, then you align with the values of that squad, and it's really amazing.
Can I
It
ask
does become a family. Like, I'm a big one. Sorry, Dan. Just that AS becomes a family for you. I'm Rhiannon Clark, who Juju trains with. I call her one of my AS daughters. They become such a part of who you are as well, and I think that helps. So, sorry, Dan, I'll throw back to you.
Yeah, very much, Cindy. I agree with that. So
I was just going to say, Mandy, you say you have your older daughter's gifted. So as a parent, how hard is it to give her what she needs as well as giving Juju what she needs?
Oh, look, I was a single parent for more than a decade when Juliette was young, and the impact on the siblings, I think, is something that is not talked about enough. She's been profoundly impacted. You have this typically developing daughter, if that's the way you want to describe it. And I spent a lot of my time with her for 3.5 years. And then Juju comes along and changes the trajectory of all of our lives. And yeah, my older daughter has been profoundly impacted. I think she has post-traumatic stress from what we went through as a family. She's now 24 and moved to Sydney and studying and on a very successful path. But the scars are real for her and for other siblings that have, their parents ripped away from them, their life ripped away from them. And that's not saying anything negative about Juju. We all love her and adore her, but the impact is profound, financially.
Time consuming too.
The time, it changes your life, holidays, resources put into the disability, emotionally, everything is impacted profoundly. Sleep, but everything, and I don't want to talk too much about my older daughter because she's moved on and she has her own life. But, when I had to read her carer impact statement for the NDIS, it changed my life forever because she's a very gifted writer. And I asked her to write the impact it had on her. And I keep that letter very close to me. It reminds me on a daily basis of things that I was never aware of and what she had to deal with. And she's watching her mother, deal with behavior that's severe, like taking her to hospital when she ran into windows, having to leave her alone, for long periods of time to address significant behavior. Emergencies always, the amount of support that Juliette needed to go to the doctor or go to the dentist, or having carers come into the home, therapists come into the home all times of the day and night, screaming. Anyone that's going through it will understand. It's just very traumatic.
It helps build their resilience too, though, I think. I think it really does. You'll find with neurotypical siblings in a lot of cases, because they have had that, I hate the word horrific, but that horrific experience, that it almost galvanizes them to be better, do better, achieve more. I know in my case, definitely, and in quite a few of my friends' cases who have similar situations, that, the other neurotypical children become almost exceptional in their own right, and they're all exceptional in their own way, but in a career fashion, or in a self development fashion, they have a resilience and a strength and an incredible determination.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also an empathy for all different sorts of challenge. And I imagine she'll end up in some sort of human rights law because of her real empathy and sensitivity to other people's difference. And you're right, she will, forge her own way and take with her her journey around Juju.
Do you think that was the most challenging aspect of being a parent?
Oh, yeah, 100%. The guilt that you feel when a lot of your time, energy, and resources are directed towards one child. And I'm never saying that my journey is any harder to anybody else's, but that was extremely difficult, because you're dealing with, when I was dealing with Juju, she was dangerous. She would run out of the street. She jumped out of the car once. She would jump off swings. She had extreme tantrums. And so, we would be at the park together and Juju would just take off, and I'd have to leave Saskia and retrieve her, things like that. There's thousands of stories. I want to write a book one day of all of the things that would occur that most, I remember, I'm sure a lot of people relate to this, listening to this, but I just remember being in the park with my 2 kids, watching Saskia, on her own, and having to attend to Juju, and looking over at other families sitting around, on the ground, talking to each other, relaxing. And my life was just one big stress. I never knew when something was going to set off Juju. And Saskia was on edge all of the time, because of that stress in our lives. So it's just so difficult to explain the impact. I think a journalist just recently asked me, what was it like when that official, I know you're coming to that part of the story, said that Juju couldn't run that night. She couldn't have the support that she needed to run at the Australian Open. And that was the most amazing minute for me when he asked me that story, because I said, I can't even tell you what it was like to hear no at that time, that brought up 21 years of trauma of all of the times that I couldn't do things in my life, or Juju couldn't do things, or my other daughter couldn't do things. And nobody could understand that. No athletics official, only other parents that have been through that could understand what, like, the thousands of times that you've been told no, you can't do this, you can't go here, you can't have this, you can't go to this birthday party, you can't go to school today, you can't go to this event. Thousands and thousands of times that you have to advocate for your child to be included, and then to have no. 21 years of that. And so, yeah, it's a profound impact.
One more, if I may, Mandy, on your older daughter, Saskia. Did she move to Sydney because she needed to start again?
No, she got access to the most amazing Be Juris program there. And it's a degree she dreamt of completing. And now I believe she's in her second year now. So no, she sadly moved away. My heart is ripped in two, but I'm so happy for her that she's on this journey of her own. She's an independent adult, pursuing her dreams. And so, she didn't run away from anything. She moved to something that she's so happy to be doing.
Funny, because one of mine moved to Brisbane in the army, and she actually said she did run away from us, but she's like, no, I needed
an element to that.
She goes,
to own a life and have your own journey. Yeah, there may be that element as well, but she's pursuing her dreams and pursuing a degree that she's very lucky to be offered.
Getting back to the sport, can you tell us a little bit about Juju's classification? So you've explained that she has some pretty profound impacts on her everyday. What does that look like for her classification? And can you tell our listeners about what limits that gives to her capacities in athletics, and how that impacts even how you go about preparing and how she copes at given events?
Yeah, you asked the most amazing questions. This is, I guess, what I want to come out of the journey that I've been through with Juju is education for officials and for organisations regarding this category, which is a really, really broad category. So her category is T20, intellectual disability. But of course, autism doesn't fit neatly into that category. And Juju then brings with it profound autism and a profound intellectual disability. So she's at the very edge of this category. Now, if you go to Special Olympics, they have specific category that caters for intellectual disability and autism. And I am going to be reaching out to Special Olympics. I just haven't had time to that. I don't know why I haven't found our way there. I've known about the Special Olympics for a long time. Amazing organisation, but they are much further ahead in their understanding of this very specific categorisation. So what comes, and I'll just talk about Juju's her impact, and how this category fits is she doesn't have language or understanding of the processes that fit around athletics. There's a lot of accommodation for her so that she can be successful. And, up until a couple of weeks ago, that was always afforded to her. I want to talk positively about her inclusion in athletics because it's been amazing. In 2023, I was allowed to go out on track with her and support her because the officials saw that there's no way she could sit in a call room in a group of athletes. You know how busy those call rooms are?
And loud.
In amongst a lot of noise, the groups, I mean, I've been to national call rooms myself. There are multiple events being called at the same time. There's a lot of come and goings. So, the cues that exist for you to be able to attend to the instructions in a call room are significant. So, when other athletes stand up in another group, Juju would think, oh, it's my turn to go and move. And, officials can be pretty
black and white
in that environment.
Black and white.
Like, this is not your turn, sit down. That's the kind of language you get in a call room. Now, I absolutely love officials. They're amazing people that volunteer their time to go, but they can be pretty terse because they're dealing with a very high stress environment and people that are trying to qualify for Olympics and things like that. So it's a very high stressful environment where they are on very tight schedules to get athletes out on track and compete. So that the language can be very terse and not necessarily directed towards one person. This is a very confusing environment for someone like Juliette.
Yeah.
To navigate her right way around someone that is not going to modify their language so she can understand it, that are not going to understand the different cues that she's attending to. Juju doesn't understand that one little group of athletes are her group and she has to stay in that group and wait, sometimes for long periods of time. You know, you get called to a call room at least half an hour ahead of an event and you have to sit for half an hour before an official will say, it's your turn to stand up and go. This is a very confusing environment for a kid like Juliette. So, yeah, this is how she's impacted. So all she needs is a very small accommodation that's always been afforded to her before, which is like a carer, me or somebody else that knows her, to sit with her and say, it's not our time yet. It's not our time yet. You need to wait. Now it's our time. And now we need to line up in order. This is something also very difficult for her to understand, right? You're going out into lane 4. You've got to stand in line, facing forward in the number 4 position, stay in that line and go out to the track in amongst other athletes pushing in and out, you know.
Noise from the crowd and yeah.
Spike up, and these rules are different depending on which track you're at. Now you have your spikes on before you leave the call room. Now you don't have your spikes on before you leave the call room. You know, she needs assistance to tie her spikes. It's a very confusing environment. And, you know, particularly in Brisbane, which was 2023, the way you walk out on the track there's multiple events being called out. You know, you're going to the 200-meter line, you're going to the 100-meter start line. And so it's a very confusing environment.
You also may have to walk halfway around the track and walk past events that you are doing later on that day.
Exactly right. It's so different. And there are, you know, javelin throwers coming across the track. There's long jumpers walking out, warming up. There's so much going on. And you can't walk into other people's, you know, warm-up areas. It's really, really, you're walking over people's track bags, all lined up at the start line. I could go on forever about how many different cues there are that you have to attend to. And then these officials that are not educated to understand kids like Juliette, not their fault. This is a very small minority of athletes. Are there any other athletes that I've ever seen at a national event like Juliette? No. There are not kids that are so profoundly impacted. When we're sitting in the long jump pit, for instance, there are other kids with her same classification, but they can sit there independently without any help. They understand what's going. They understand when they need to go up to the, say, in the long jump pit where they have to find their marker, where they have to wait for the flag, when they have to go. But all Juliette needs is someone to be with her, to wait with her, to tell her it's her turn to go, to put her at either her position in the long jump pit or at the start line and walk away. Once you get to that position and she knows she can see her blocks, she knows to walk to her block, she's completely independent. It's just a little bit of accommodation, but that's always been afforded to her with no question before.
So why
And
wasn't it this time?
I know.
Can I ask, why wasn't it this time, Mandy?
Well, I guess one official that took a very hard view that shouldn't be accommodated to her, that it might advantage her in some way over other athletes, and took a very hard line that should not be afforded to her.
So, Dan, for your understanding, athletes with a disability that require additional support have access to an assistance form that is used to help support the successful attendance and completion of events. Parents actually have to fill that form out. Generally, with a lot will get doctor's letters to I guess, go with it. They have to put that form in prior to the event. So in some cases, you have to be there 2 hours before everything starts to make sure that you've approached the correct official, put the paperwork in. I actually had a really great talk with another parent, a couple of parents, Julie and Bill Pendred, and they've chosen to not send their profoundly disabled daughter to nationals for that reason, because, you know, they go to an event with a folder. It has the doctor's reports. It has the assistant's reports. They turn up to events as soon as the gates open. They go to the technical official, and they've been fairly lucky, I guess, being based in Victoria. They've had some bad experiences, but most times an official will walk down to them prior to the event and they can explain why they need the adaptions that they have. But it was interesting in their conversations, and I'm sure Mandy understands it, that they have to actually make sure that they've got that paperwork and that it is spot on and that it lists every accommodation that is needed, because it's really hard to get the adaptations needed for these children to be able to, and adults to be able to experience the best experience. So these letters, and I've been privileged to be able to see Mandy's one that she put in for nationals, and it surprised me, to be honest, the response that was given to that. And I've been, I guess, exposed to them before because of the long term in athletics. But the more information you can give, it's really good. You know, you will say that your child is non-verbal. So if they were addressed in a call room and expected to give an answer, they can't. You know, if an official was to ask them what their long jump run up is, they verbally cannot do that. So these forms are about providing as much information as you can, and hopefully being allowed to then have a support person, which the ruling is quite broad. World Para Athletics do have rulings, and they are almost ambiguous in their wording, in that it does come down to personal interpretation of those rules.
Yeah, I mean, that's what surprised me. I guess, you know, that when this has always been provided to you before, and remembering too that nationals here was in Perth, so there are a lot of Perth officials that know Juju. She's very well known at the track. So she competes on a weekly basis through the season, and all of the officials know her well, and they're absolutely lovely with her. They make every accommodation to allow her to compete successfully. So she's very well known in that community. And it's always been afforded to her before, including in 2023. And in 2023, something really interesting happened. She has a very passionate coach that supports her in every single way. He also knows the rules very, very well. He's been a world official, and he's very well educated in the disability field. So he knows those rules often much better than the officials. Anyway, so in 2023, I was afforded that accommodation to go out and support her. What happened was, in the 100 meters in Brisbane, where you get released from the finish line, it goes straight out onto the road. The release area goes straight onto the road. And one of the officials, even though they were notified that she was a T20 athlete, they let her out onto the road, and she walked out onto the road. It was very dangerous. And her coach, we couldn't find her. I ran as fast as I could to get to the finish line to try and find her, but it's really difficult to navigate a track when there are a lot of events on, even though you've got a high-vis vest and everything on. Anyway, so her coach ran outside of the stadium and finds her on the road, you know, looking around confused and scared because she had been released from the track. So this is, you know, it's very dangerous when you have officials that are not educated about this type of disability. That's why it's always been afforded to her in the past. People know she needs support, a little bit of support. We work very, very hard that she can be independent once she gets to the start line. But yeah, this has always been afforded to her in the past. That's why it was so confusing to me that the answer was definitely no, under no circumstance, and no, you know, discussion around it. There was very, you know, I won't talk about the discrimination elements because that's a legal case that will be underway now, and I'm pursuing that to every single degree because we've been down that path before successfully. But yeah, no even sort of discussion around why this change occurred. And there was a heads up weeks out that this might happen. And so I went into a long conversation with the team manager on what was going to occur, what was going to happen. Was there a rule change? Was there going to be a different interpretation around this rule? Could they consult with me about it? And no consultation occurred until the day of that event. And then it was just a blanket no, under no circumstance will that be accommodated to Juliette.
Can I ask this particular official, did he or she know of Juju, and did he or she know of the information you had, Mandy, allowing yourself or another carer to go out on track with her, or they did know about it but just decided that the rules had changed and they weren't going to budge?
Well, I guess that's something that will have to come out because they haven't been in contact with me about that process. I have reached out to Australian Athletics. There has been no communication around that decision or why that decision was made. Journalists have asked them the same question and they failed to respond to both the ABC and to the West Australian. So, you know, that's something that's going to have to be found out through the process. Did this one person take a dislike to me. That's one possibility, because I'm quite, outspoken in how things occur. And I had also went through the process of consulting a lawyer at the time this was occurring. Did this one person take a dislike to me, which would be, indirect discrimination, and decide that they were going to dig their heels in and keep this rule in place and not allow that accommodation? I don't know. That will have to unfold. I spoke with that one official. He was, I would say, at a minimum, very rude, very blunt, and would not engage in a conversation as to why he made that decision. And there appears to be no appeal process, which occurs in so many other avenues of athletics, to question that decision.
Do you think that it was a understanding possibly of the rules? And I know we're preempting what somebody else's decision-making and thoughts are, and we can't do that. But do you think one personally?
I definitely know it is no misunderstanding of
the
rules, because this official has been around for a long time, a very highly experienced, very high level person in athletics.
So would be very aware of the rulings. And look, I've been involved in the rulings before. I've seen the rulings. I've read the paperwork. I understand that there is interpretation. There is possibility to put your own interpretation on it, but it is pretty clear, that there is the capacity for support people, and it does go into different classifications, and the levels of support can be given to different classifications, because of course different classifications have different needs. But in this case, from my personal view, and it is only my personal view, it was fairly clear in the rulings that there was capacity for support for Juliette that could have been put in place, and it did seem like it was just shut down. And I've been to many nationals. I've officiated at state level. My children have officiated at national. It is a very high pressure environment, but you would hope that the people that are in those roles, yes, there are black and white rules. Yes, there are interpretative rules, but you would hope that there is also a personal aspect, and people could step back and go, hold on, and this is why Julie and Bill approached officials prior and asked them to come out for a walk, so that they could actually show, what the struggles were. Do you think it is that it was just high pressure? Do you think that it's a learning thing? Do you think that it is, officials not understanding their rules properly? From a personal view, and only a personal view, why do you think it elevated so extremely and impacted Juju so incredibly?
Yeah. Look, I don't want to say, I have to be very careful about what I say,
of course.
I guess, but there definitely is accommodation within those rules. Now, this one official, I could be wrong, but he's a lawyer. I understand that he was involved in the drafting of those rules. He knows the rules very well. I think he took a hard approach, that it may, provide her with assistance that other people didn't have access to. However, also know that 2 days earlier, he did allow an athlete to have the same accommodation made. So you have to think, is it something about me? The way I approached him, I questioned things. I'm a pretty outspoken person. I'm an advocate for people with disability, and I have been through a major court case for discrimination in the past, one of the biggest discrimination cases ever in Australia's history, for the rights for adjustments for children like Juliette. So I know the discrimination law very well. I imagine better than him. And you can't put in a rule, regardless of a rule, you can't put a rule in place that discriminates against people and say, oh, I have a rule, so I am going to put that rule in place. If it's discriminatory, doesn't matter what your rule is. If it's discrimination, you have to make an accommodation. And it's a reasonable adjustment to say, I believe, we just need someone to sit with her in the call room, take her to the stand or take her to the long jump pit, orientate her, and then come back from the position. That is a tiny accommodation. So all that conversation to be is, okay, the other question you asked, which is a really good one, did they know Juliette? Do they know about her circumstances? Absolutely, because her coach has a very close association. I'm going to be careful about what I say about him, but he works for in the athletic field.
And has worked in parasport for a long time as well.
Everybody knows him. The official knows him very well. I got him to call, come up to the call room and talk to him I called him on the phone because he was down. I was actually with Juliette at the time that this was all unfolding. And remember, you know this so well. This is high pressure because she was called to the call room at 4:30. Her event was 5 o'clock.
Time frames
this
are
all
tight.
Unfolded, and you got to pick up the form. You submit the form before, but you go and pick up the form on the way to the call room. So we all thought everything was going to be fine. Her coach thought it was going to be fine, that her assistant coach take her to the call room and take her to the track. She was the carer that we asked for support. She is employed by World Athletics herself, so she knows Juliette.
What to do.
Well, she knows what to do, and she's done this for Juliette before on many occasions. She does it every week at Stripe, so it's never been questioned before. So yeah, it's a very high pressure situation. I approached him, asked him why this was occurring, and he goes, "It is what it is. Get out." Basically. So this I believe is discrimination, not making reasonable adjustment that could be made that would have allowed her to compete. And now, unfortunately, because there's no discussion, now I have to test this case in the courts. And that's what I'm going to do. If you ask me today, what do I want to do with my future going forward? I love sport more than anything. It saved my life on thousands of occasions, especially through everything I went with Juliette. And I believe what comes together for kids with disability in sport is so profoundly impactful. So incredible what occurs for a family when they're surrounded by people that lift their child up and give them opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise occur. So I believe my future is in advocacy for kids with disability in sport. And I guess excited about the possibility of educating officials about what's necessary to ensure that kids with profoundly impacted disability can be included.
This is Inclusion Talks, and we're here for KISS Professional Solutions. You can get KISS Professional Solutions on 1300 547 777. They're the largest independent provider of copiers and printers in Victoria. And Mandy Mason is our guest today. Now, Mandy, there's a few questions I'd like to unpack from what we've just heard without, of course, getting too far into it in regard to the legal case. I hope you don't mind me asking you this, do you regret the way that you've approached it at times, that maybe you need to change the way you approach? Because obviously this official to me seems to lack people skills. And does the official have an axe to grind with Juju's personal coach and was determined to get one up in this situation? And if so, does that mean that he needs to lose his position as an official?
Wow, that's a big question, Dan. It's a great question also, because while I'm saying things about this one official who's a very experienced, very high-level person who knows a lot about disability, is my understanding, this is a one-off occasion. This has never occurred before. The accommodations and the outpouring of support for Juju by every other official I've ever had contact with has been incredible. And there are a lot of officials, I can't name anyone, that came up to me through this process and, it gave a lot of support for what Juju was dealing with, really profoundly impacted by it and, emotional about it. So it's just one person that took a hardline view. And, perhaps if I had to say anything, it's like, well, we don't want to advantage one athlete over the other. It's a crazy view. You can't say that every athlete needs the same accommodation. The comparison I gave is, look at the amount of accommodation that's made for elite athletes with their coaches by trackside, coaching them through events. And I love the pole vault. Look at the success in the world the pole vault's had. Go spend time watching the pole vault and the amount of support that those athletes get from their coaches, only 1 meter from the pole vault mat, right? You've got coaches with iPads taking videos, giving feedback to their athletes so that they can improve their performance on the next jump. How can you allow that and then not allow a carer to take someone to a start line? It's so insane. This conversation has to occur.
Realistically, I'd love to interject there. I find that the common comment is it's about safety. Surely having an athlete with a disability, especially a profound disability, but any athlete with a disability, surely by accommodating them, by allowing them a carer or a support person, is actually increasing the safety of an event, not lessening it.
Absolutely. So you know track so well. Imagine this. You have to go from a call room in Perth, the call room, you walk past the pole vault area, right, to the long jump pit. There are pole vaulters warming up, running at speed fast. You have to understand that you've got to stay in your line, not go onto a track, not deviate, not walk into other athletes. It is such a difficult thing for a kid like Juliette to understand. It is dangerous because she's so used to going to strive events, same track, right? Different rules on that day, where she's allowed to walk around the pole vault mat at the start line of the 100 meters, talk to other athletes, maybe walk to the back in the grass, not at nationals. Like, you've got to behave very differently in a national event. So same track, different rules. So hard for someone like Juliette to learn as a once-off. Now, if the official said to me, hey, in 12 months' time, we're not going to allow this accommodation anymore, that gives me 12 months to teach Juju how to behave at a national event. But when you tell me with 10 minutes warning that you're not going to allow this accommodation that you've always allowed in the past, that is very different. You can't, And then the other thing is, if you think that, I reckon you could take the best coach in the world. I happen to think that Danny's the best coach in the world. But let's just say you took Usain Bolt's coach and allowed him to take Juliette from the call room to the start line. Nothing he could do in 5 minutes change her performance on the track.
Yeah.
Thousands of hours of support for Juliette to learn small changes in her athletes.
Yeah.
No amount of accommodation from the most elite coach in the world for 5 minutes is going to change her performance on a track.
And it's not that you're asking for a coach, you're asking for a support person.
Even if I was asking for that, this is not going to change it for her or any athlete. Let's be real. Nothing you can do for 5 minutes is going to change your performance for a kid like Juliette. And that wasn't even going to occur. There was no coaching that was going to occur because that's just confusing for a kid like Juliette. All the cues are in place. They've been there for a long time, and we don't want to change anything. We just want to get her to the start line and get her to start. So, Dan, you asked an amazing question. Why did this occur? Do I hope that this official has to undergo training and coaching for how to address parents who have got 21 years of trauma, that are just trying to get their kids to compete in a sport that they love and are supported in, just so that she could lift? You know what? Juju lifts up a lot of athletes, not just kids with disabilities. She lifts up elite athletes that see her level of challenge and who is able to turn up to a track and compete. She lifts up a lot of people. We should be celebrating kids like Juju, not cutting them down. So do I have a personal now journey to go on to educate people like this one official? Absolutely. Will I take it on with a vengeance? Absolutely. Will I do everything that's possible to ensure that this doesn't happen again to other kids like Juliette? Absolutely. Is there a rising of kids like Juliette for competition? 1000%. Do you know why? Because we have an NDIS scheme that advocates for inclusion, funding mechanisms to support kids like Juju so that they can compete. And the NDIS is now having an impact such that more kids with autism are going to be competing. We better make sure that our sport is ready for those types of kids, because right now it's very evident it is not.
To talk to Mandy Mason, the mother of Juju, about. So that is part one. We've got so much more to unpack for part two on Inclusion Talks with Cindy McDougall and Dan Lonigan. And we look forward to part two next week for KISS Professional Solutions. See you then.